So we head into our last hour of open lines on Coast to Coast AM, and thank you, George Noory, for the time off, and I mean him, so that I can get to be on, which is always fun. Had on our guest Mark Anthony talking about luck, being unlucky, and how the number 13 shaped our United States Constitution, how the experience of the Freemasons led to specific mentions of things in the Bill of Rights. And then on top of that, we sort of speculated about the repetition of 13 as a fractal throughout United States history. But you don't have to go there. You can just go back and listen to that anytime you want. The first hour is always on YouTube for free. Just subscribe and listen no matter where you are, especially for people who are having a hard time getting the station in these days. I saw somebody on Twitter talking about how they were listening to some station that was running Coast to Coast and another program at the same time on top of each other. And I think that's maybe automation, but that's also somebody not paying attention who goes over and turns off one and turns up the other. So I hope you'll turn up Coast to Coast AM next. On Coast to Coast AM, this is Ian Punnett. I wanted to give honor to the question that was asked before the top of the hour about my thoughts on religion in Europe, I believe, if I understood the question properly, which is interesting to see the statistics of what had been once prominent sort of theocracies or state churches. The influence is diminished. And the people who identify as either atheist or agnostic or a quote-unquote non-believer, that's going up significantly. It's not just in places like Germany. It's not just places where, traditionally Berlin has been considered sort of the birthplace of modern atheism. But really kind of everywhere. The people pay lip service to religion. They're sort of C&E Christians if that's their choice. But the divisions between Catholics and Protestants is just not what it used to be, and people aren't inheriting that. They're not passing that down. So that's kind of going by the wayside. I know there are lots of places in Europe where I have been where they have the churches there, the edifices are there, but hardly anybody shows up for the services. And my wife is currently in Madrid, and she was showing me some images, really beautiful images of churches. But there was one church, she said, where she saw a bunch of people standing in front. I didn't even ask about the other ones, at least not according to statistics. But anyway, there you go. I hope that helps. Let's go to open lines on Coast to Coast. Leonard is in North Carolina on Coast to Coast as we head into our last hour of open lines. Leonard, where are you going to take us?
I was just wondering about the last Powerball lottery they had. It was over $1 billion. And the last few times it's been over $1 billion. Seems like only one person is winning.
Right.
Was one person is coming forward saying they won. And it's always in either California, Michigan, or Florida. What do you think about that?
I think that's interesting. It shows that they probably play the same numbers over and over and over again. That areas where, if you played the thing is, like, most people play the lottery only when it gets past a certain point, right? So used to be $1 million seemed like enough. Now, sort of wake me when we get up to $500 million. And I think in order to have any chance with any kind of game like that, you have to play every single day. Play your numbers. Keep track of how much you've spent doing it. But, if that's how you're going to do it, that's the only way, I think, to win. Why? What's yours?
Well, my numbers always never haven't seen that matching number. I would think that just the fact that so many people are playing, more than one person should win, because it used to be would be lower large amounts. You'd have 4 or 5 people have to split it. But lately it's just been like one person winning, and I'm like, this can't be. The odds are so fanatical to win to begin with, but since the odds are even should be even more suspect that more than just one person would have the same numbers.
Well, that's interesting.
And the right numbers.
Right. I'd have to be a statistician to explore that, or have one on whether winning by oneself is statistically anomalous, or whether that's pretty much just the same as two people playing the same numbers. So, yeah, maybe it has to do with the commonality of the numbers. I know that sounds silly. You think, well, all numbers are common, but, maybe they only played even numbers, or maybe they only maybe they had a certain pattern and other people were following that same pattern. So when the number came up, more people won. But all right, Rosa is in California on Coast to Coast. Rosa?
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, you can hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, first I just wanted to say I appreciate that you guys, all the hosts and George and everybody, you guys seem to be so respectful and kind, and I just wanted to say I appreciated that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
And let me see. I just had a couple comments and then a question for you.
Okay.
Did you know that the Bad Luck Day in Mexico was actually Tuesday the 13th?
No, I didn't know that. Funny, why? Was that a Mexican Revolution Day, or was that
I have no idea. My mom was born in Guadalajara, and she told me that.
I love that.
Kind of interesting.
I totally love that. That's great. Never heard that.
You know these other two comments. I'm guessing you most likely know these facts, but for the people who don't know, that much of the Constitution was inspired by the Bible. In fact, due process came directly from the Bible. You know that?
Well, no. I think this is really important to point out that the main. I mean, there are aspects of the Constitution that come through the various books of common order. So if we want to look at it that way, whether it's Anglican or Presbyterian, but I think you can make a better case, I think, for due process. I think there are examples of that in the Bible, but I don't think it's directly like they went and they looked it up and they wrote it in the Bible. But I could be wrong on that. I've never researched it. So, yeah. Well, for the time being, you win. I have no idea that that's not right. But I do know that having studied the Constitution before, the Founding Fathers weren't that religious. They were Masonic, but 13 were what we would call deists, right? They were believers in God, but they weren't very specific in terms of turning to the Bible at every occasion. We aren't. That's why there's no site references, particularly for the Bible. But is it fair to say that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I hate to say that. God, I hate that when somebody else is right and I'm not. No. Anyway, and the question I wanted to ask you is, do you believe in fate or destiny?
Well, why is it a zero-sum game? Fate is future, right? That can be a lot of different ways of looking at it. I'm not a Calvinist enough to think that my demise was written out on my birth. I don't believe that I'm just working towards some date, some number, some time, and that's my time. I know that's how we look at it metaphorically. But destiny is much more about how we shape our lives, right? So there's lots of people I work with, I think, or have over the years, who are way talented. But for whatever reason, some voice of insecurity that they could never get past, or a need for stability or whatever, and they never really pursued what could have been their destiny, which I think would be a successful life in media. So I don't know that they were destined to fail. I think they were destined to succeed if they'd been willing to embrace it. Well, how does that sound?
Perception. Everything's about perception, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a trade-off.
Yep.
Right? Which is the other thing, is like you can get so focused on fate and what your fate is that you miss the chance to shape your destiny.
Exactly. Exactly, learning them from our mistakes and
Yeah.
hopefully so not chewing on the same bone forever, right?
Right.
Moving on after you learn your lesson.
Yeah, very good. Good use of that metaphor, too. Thank you, bro. So Johnny is in Louisville on Coast to Coast. Johnny?
Hi. Just had a couple of comments. First, it's already passed, but yesterday, October 13th, was the birthday of Chris Carter, the creator of the X-Files.
Oh, yeah. Funny.
And in fact, his production company is called 1013.
Well, that's really cool. And so he's still with us, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he is.
Okay. Also, well, here in Louisville, on WHAS, there's on Sunday mornings there's a real estate program, and the past couple of the past few days I've been hearing previews for this week's show, and it's should you get a paranormal review before you buy a house?
Wow. What does that mean?
I don't know.
And that's on HAS?
WHAS.
Yeah, I know
Sundays,
the station.
I believe 8:30 a.m.
I know Louisville pretty well. I never heard that. That's so funny. So, yeah, I guess it means then somebody has found a new revenue stream and they're giving you psychic advice about what properties to purchase? Does that sound right?
Apparently.
Okay. That's weird, man. I've just never heard that before. But I guess that's if one is so inclined, you'd have to do that. I think that there's a component to buying a home which is intuitive, but I don't know that I would call that the paranormal. My wife and I have bought and sold homes many times, and when we do, I think there's just a vibe maybe from a house, and you think, and on paper it might look very different than when you actually drive out and see it, but I don't know what they're doing, but that's quite an interesting show. I have to look that up for a guest, and I'll find out whether he's or she is only in Louisville. So I'll do that. Thank you, Johnny. We'll go to Lewis, who's in my old stomps in Phoenix, in Coast to Coast. Lewis?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. So I had a question relating to the Tupac Shakur case you were just talking about, and I didn't hear the guy mention P. Diddy, Sean P. Diddy. I don't know if you've heard of that rapper.
Oh, come on, dude. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Me and Diddy go way back.
But
I'm serious.
Did you hear about how he was related to the case?
Well, so there's speculation and there's fact. And right now we still don't know what the presentation of the facts are, right? So we got the whole West Coast, East Coast thing. I'm hip to that. And I know that it was sort of a myth that went around for a long time that said that P. Diddy or Sean Combs has already been proven to be directly involved. I don't happen to believe that. I don't think he's. But go ahead. What did you hear?
Alive.
What's that?
Just like how people would say he's still alive for years, and now there's someone being charged, and it kind of doesn't look good for all these conspiracy theories about that, because even all over social media, all I saw growing up is Tupac's alive. He's in the Bahamas. He's in right. And you can't believe much nowadays. But it says on ABC News, P. Diddy went on the stand because they got all these claims, and who knows what's going to happen, but time will tell.
Yeah. No, I'm open to it, but I just didn't P. Diddy was, he's a pretty middle class guy. He was very upwardly mobile. I don't know that I would have thought of him and put him in this sort of, gangsta group like we would, I think, which is natural when we talk about Biggie Smalls, because I think that's a very different thing. And this new, this way that people are relating to the different names have come forward, which I didn't read the whole article, but I saw something earlier this week that said that this was the murder of, see if I get it right, the murder of Tupac was never a whodunit. That the police investigators had an operating theory. They just didn't have the evidence, and now they have the evidence. We just don't know quite yet what that's all about. So, yeah, cool. Well, I appreciate that. That's really good.
And what are your thoughts on Hamas and the situation, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I don't think there's any. There's a mistake that people keep making, which is equating Hamas with Palestinians. I mean, they are. The Hamas organization is intended and was framed with the intent of killing as many Jews, Israelis as they could. So that's not a legitimate organization. That's just a murder gang, and I don't. The killing of innocents. It doesn't matter whether you're beheading babies or suffocating them. It doesn't matter. If that's your whole goal, is just trying to strike terror by coming after civilians, there's not a lot to think about. I hope if they can't be stopped, then I hope that they're eliminated. And I know that sounds awful, but you go back, and I think the Hamas is to Gaza or Palestinians what the SS was to the average German. And I hope that people get it right. I hope that they stop this thing on campuses across the country. I know it's a minority thing, that is to say that there's not many people that believe this, but gosh, those comments about in support of Hamas as being as sort of these freedom fighters and all that other crap, I don't believe in that. So I won't go into politics much, but I will say that because it's so obvious. And I think we have to be mindful of that. We can't get sucked into this false equivalency. And that way we can better judge history and the players involved. But Hamas doesn't deserve any respect. Neither does Hezbollah. And regardless of your feelings about your state or regardless of your feelings about other people, we do not have the right to kill. You can marginalize your enemy to the point where you feel like you're not really killing a real human being, but that's only your perspective. And I'm not saying you. I just mean that's only one's perspective. So no, Hamas gets no respect for me, never has. And I hope this is only over quick, and that as fewer deaths as necessary will take place in order to do it. But something's got to end this. So that's what I think. All right, going to the last half hour. Boy, we've got a stack, but there's room for you for open lines on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. Al in San Antonio wants to share a quick story for open lines on Coast to Coast. Al?
Hey, how you doing? It's an honor to be on your show.
Glad to have you.
I started working with this trucking company about 8 years ago. And when I started working here, nobody told me this place was really haunted. And I seen apparitions and
what do you see?
Move around. And
what do you see?
It happens all the time.
Okay, but what do you see?
People, you see different entities. They look like real people, but they're not. I've seen...
sort of like the Kardashians.
What's that?
No, nothing. Go ahead. And so, what are they doing when you see them? These apparitions?
Well, they bother a lot of these people that drive trucks, and especially it happens like between 11:30 and like 5 o'clock in the morning. Like 2 weeks ago, I kept seeing this guy standing behind a truck, and I kept going over there thinking it was one of the truckers. But by the time I would get over there was nobody there. And so I usually don't pay too much attention to it like I used to, because I guess the more attention you give them, the more they present themselves. But I've seen a lot of different objects that are like energies moving around and stuff here. And a lot of the people that work in the office at night usually have a lot of problems hearing things,
Well, I hope they're keeping cell phones ever at the ready, a smartphone that can record.
They do, but it's
put it out in the company newsletter.
And I won't say the name of the company because people want to come over here all the time.
Right.
But I was talking to these guys about 2 hours ago, and they were telling me about. I wasn't here because I only work nights here, so I'm in charge of security here. So they were telling me that this one trucker, like 2 weeks ago, somebody was scratching the top of the truck, and the guy got so really scared and got out of the truck and run to the office. And he really got scared. The guy quit. And I've had a lot of truckers complain, that they're always shaking their trucks and scratching the side of the trucks, and they think it's other truckers, but that's not true. It's just this place here has got a lot of energy here that moves around a lot.
A lot of bored ghosts who just looking to pick a fight. Sounds like I'll appreciate it, but that's interesting. I love that if you get it on video. Send it to me so we can see it, because even if you're sitting in a cab and it's getting rocked back and forth, you don't have to get a shot of it. Alberta, Canada has Don on the international line on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Don.
I have a question about in the media how when we have overwhelming evidence about, let's say, the moon and the Titanic. And the moon, according to ancient text, and radiation doesn't lie, and we know that steel is 20 times, glass is 20 times stronger than steel when it's made in a vacuum. But there's tons of photographs that were taken. But, well, some people don't believe that we actually went to the moon, but there's tons of really good photographs of bases on the moon. According to India and China, they had bases on the moon, and they nuked each other back to the Stone Age. And if you look at ancient lost cities, there was 2 of them they've recently discovered that were destroyed by above-ground nuclear detonation. So we know that they had atomic weapons, and we also know in their records, when they found one city, then they found out where the second one was. Cause
you're saying we know this on the moon, is what you're saying.
Sorry?
We know this happened on the moon.
No, the cities were destroyed down here on Earth. That's why they stopped going. According to the documentation, they were about 64 times more advanced then than we are today. But we can jump ahead. Let's look at the Titanic, for instance. Okay, so the Titanic, we can prove now that it was actually the Olympia by the propellers, because they can actually go down there and take pictures.
No.
And the name on the side is falling off.
No, Don, no. I have friends who are experts. They would argue with you. I mean, they are experts, and they would argue that till you die. So that's the kind of stuff that pops up on the internet, and it looks great in photos and whatever, but I don't think it stands up to.
So you're saying all these photos that they were taking of the propellers and the
No. I'm not doing that. I'm just telling you, I'm not going to get triangulated with my friends who are experts. I'll have them back on sometime, and then you can give them your best case, and then I'll let them respond. How's that sound?
Okay. Well,
but I just don't believe in. No. I'm not going to. There's a lot of stuff that people get this derivative stuff off websites, and they go see because you can see something, but that doesn't make it true. It's what we call a blogger's model of truth, where you just send out something and then you judge whether or not it holds water based on the number of people who accept it or not. And I haven't seen that vetted scientifically. I haven't seen that. All I've ever known are the people who know the Titanic, and they say that's not true. But I appreciate your thought on certainly about the other stuff. I always learn something on Coast to Coast. Daniel's in Fresno, west of the Rockies. He has a quick story he wants to tell us about a prophetic dream. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, hi. How you doing, Ian? So in February 2014, I had a dream, and I was given a date of October 7, 2034. And so in the dream, I was in the Kremlin, and then I was, here and there. It was a pretty long dream, but I woke up with the date from the dream of October 7, 1954. So I went online looking up that date to see what happened on that date. I didn't find anything in particular, so I said, well, what happened October 7, 1952, 2 years before, which is an important date for my family. And so I found that October 7, 1952 was the birthday of Vladimir Putin, and which gave me the answer that in 1954 he would have been 2 years old. And now, in the dream, I was given the information to check every 40 years after that date that I was given in the dream. And so I came to October 7, 1994, and I looked that date up, which was when Saddam Hussein tried to reinvade Kuwait because he wanted to test Bill Clinton's, whether or not he would respond. And so Bill Clinton ended up sending a fleet on October 7, 1994, to stop Hussein from reinvading Kuwait. That's what happened on October 7, 94. So according to my dream's calculation, 40 years after that is October 7, 2034, which, from what I could tell, was communicated to me in the dream is when the major East-West conflict will begin. Now, I wanted to call last week, last Friday.
I think this is really good. So this is great. So we can mark that on a calendar, and we can say this is Daniel from Fresno's prediction on this date. And then sometime like August 1st of next year, right? August 1st, would you call and remind people?
If you'd like me to, sure, I could try to do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, I think if you're going to say something, stand by it. So I'm good with that. And we'll find out whether it is the beginning of the end. I will tell you again, I think this has happened a billion times, but someone's going to be right sometime. First time caller line, John is in Florida on Coast to Coast. John?
Yeah, hello. I was talking about, Friday. First of all, thanks for taking my call, Ian and Mark Anthony. By the way, I love that name. I like Jerry Lowe a lot, so I just love that name. So
yeah,
compliments to you for that name. If you can sing a song, that'd be great too.
Well, he's not here right now, so it's just me. But go ahead. You had a comment?
Oh yes. I was calling because I'm Catholic, and I remember as a child, many years ago. I'm 62 years old, but in the 60s, the priest used to tell families on Friday the 13th. To stay in their house. I remember I had a particular priest who was Catholic, Irish Catholic, and he would tell people that there was evil in the air on Friday the 13th, and that children should stay home from school on that day, and people should stay in their house and pray. And he would tell people that they and I guess there was a lot of people that followed that or that believed in that. Because there were people who got so scared they wouldn't go to work, and they basically would do nothing that day except stay home and pray.
Yeah. What did that guy shut down the local Catholic elementary school?
Yeah, I did go to Catholic elementary school, and yes, a lot of people did stay home.
No. Instead of saying a lot, I mean, what I'm saying is he had the power to shut down school.
Well,
right?
I don't remember. I was a kid at the time, so I don't remember if the schools were actually shut. I just remember my parents did not let us go to school on the Friday the 13th because it was suggested by the priest, and they made a sermon about it in the church. Even I remember that.
Right. And how do you do? How are you today around October 13th?
Oh, I'm not that way anymore.
But it's interesting. As a kid, it made a big impression on you. So thanks for.
It certainly did. But as when I went in the Army and did a number of things growing up as an adult, so I've grown past that. I've had more fears from overseas duty than I've had.
Than for Friday the 13th. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Wildcard line. Bill is in Washington on Coast to Coast. Bill.
Hello.
Hey. Open lines.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me on. I'm listening since it was Art.
Oh, glad to have you.
I heard something a couple of weeks or a month ago about the fires in Hawaii.
Okay.
And that it was actually what it was is there's a space platform with a laser, and it was a test gone wrong. And that is why they put up the black fence so nobody could see it, because the laser did not burn up the blue cars because of the light spectrum.
What?
And I was wondering if you guys heard anything about that.
Oh, well, first of all, that's so August of this summer. So it's so, at this point, it's kind of old hat because the Hawaiian Power Company, whatever, Hawaiian Electric, whatever it's called, they've already said it was their fault. They said it was down power lines, which they left too long on the ground, and that's what sparked the fire. Now, how often does a corporation come out and admit something like that? Rarely. Occam's razor would say the simplest solution is the most likely. The space laser thing I had heard about, but I thought that was pretty well put to bed already. The blue car thing, though, that's got to say, that's a new twist. So you're saying blue cars weren't susceptible to what?
Well, if you, and I wondered about that connection, so I Googled it. And if you Google the effects of laser on blue,
okay,
lasers cannot heat up the color blue because of the light spectrum.
All right, so in real time, I'm going to go look that up. And you say I look up lasers cannot...
the effect on the color blue.
Have no effect on the color blue. How about that? Okay, let's see what it says. And it says, the blue chair can't absorb the laser red light because it's an inanimate object. If I shine a red laser onto a blue chair, says that. How do lasers damage the color blue? Lasers work by concentrating a lot of energy in the specific color light. So if an object doesn't absorb much energy, it's less likely to heat up and burn. But it doesn't say it can't, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting. I actually have never heard that, so that was a great twist.
I'm an old man and easily confused.
No. I think that was fair. I'm glad you brought it up. Thanks. Brian is in Indiana on Coast to Coast. He's the Rockies. Go ahead, Brian.
Hello. How are you guys today?
Good. Got a minute for you. Go ahead.
Sure. We were talking about the number 13. Originally, that represented El Shaddai, which is the one of
it's the god of the mountain.
Well, it meant God was enough, more than enough. Is kind of loosely what it interprets to. But
El Shaddai represented a way of certain people. So, like there's a long list of various names for God,
right?
But they're all still talking about the same God. They just come from culturally different aspects. And El Shaddai, I believe, was God of the mountain. Is actually what it comes down to. But.
And he represented the 13 and 1. Basically, all these mercies into one God.
Okay.
Whereas the early Christian church, prior to Constantine, and prior to the idea or ideology of the Trinity, Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and so they separated out the one versus the 13, and so the early Pharisees, they were against Christ. Well, it was one of the many reasons they were against Christianity and Jesus Christ was because this blasphemy in their eyes of the one God, yet they have this God that's all encompassing. And then if you go back even further than that, it also represented the years that it took for Venus to make a full cycle back to its original position, which makes a pentagram.
Okay. All right. Where I think there's a lot of people who are. I think some of that was really interesting, but remember, Jesus, for all intents and purposes, was a Pharisee. So there was no separate rabbinic class for him to have become a rabbi than to be a Pharisee, which is why there's so often these references to him fraternizing with Pharisees. These are his peeps, So if you look at it in terms of the hierarchy of ordination, it wasn't they were against. They weren't at war. The Pharisees versus Jesus. It was Jesus had a different opinion than the other Pharisees did. So at least I think that's played out over and over again if we're willing to stay open to it. So thank you for that thought, though. And the blue cars not burning. Interesting. I have to even go back over and look at the video of that. But you give us so many great suggestions for future guests and future topics, and thank you. That's Open Lines is our little way, like a little focus group of like what people are talking about. So we'll build from there. Hope you enjoyed having Mark Anthony on earlier. Lots of great guests coming your way. You can connect with Mark and see what else is coming up this weekend by going to coasttocoastam.com. And I'll be on, I think, in another week or so on a Friday night. So in the meantime, Deus te amat, and I do too.